Hello, Prime Media audiences. This is your host, Ladette Muleta. I'm here joined by a new guest. His name is Lavani Mila. Lavani is joining me from Nairobi, Kenya, and he's joining me over Zoom. Lavani, welcome to Prime Media. Thank you for taking your time and joining me today. Welcome.
Thank you, Ladette, it is my pleasure. It is my pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you so much.
Great. Lavani, if you could please introduce yourself to the guests so that they get to know your background, we'd appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much. So my intros are very brief. I'm an African born in Kenya. I'm also a lawyer by profession and currently a resident in Kenya. I'm also an entrepreneur. I do quite a lot of interested in technology and above everything else, I'm an African enthusiast. In that the future of Africa is brighter, and also an optimist, believing that there are opportunities and underlying potential in our continent that need to be harnessed. So that informs basically the whole agenda or the brief part of who I am.
Thank you for joining me again, Lavani, and we're delighted to have you here at Prime Media. I want to start off our discussion about what's been happening in Africa, some of the highlights of what has been going on in the last year or two. There's been a lot of chatter about Africa and hashtag no more, hashtag wake up Africa. A lot of movements in regards to Africa rising or Africa changing the narratives. There's been a lot of issues in countries like Mali, DRC, and so forth. What are some of the highlights for you in Africa in the last 2 years?
I think the past 2 years have been very interesting in respect to the African continent and its people. We have witnessed a lot of events, especially perhaps the top three to me will be since when coronavirus was discovered in Wuhan, China, and the response thereafter, and the fallout also. We saw how the Wild West and also the East behaved. The rush to discover, to find a vaccine for coronavirus, and also thereafter, after the vaccine being redistributed across the globe, Wild West took almost all day on, and the continent of Africa also the vulnerable in the society because of the lockdowns that came into the system is not ready to handle future pandemics, and we need to prepare early enough in case of future pandemics, because it is not a matter of if. Scientists out there are telling us it is possible. It is just a matter of when the next pandemic might hit us. And if we remain unprepared, then we may suffer very heavy consequences and perhaps casualties, because if coronavirus was more severe or it was severe, I think we would have lost a lot of people in the continent of Africa because the world basically neglected us. Maybe the second thing that may be highlighting the past 2 years should be what happened in Ethiopia and the resistance that generally grew across Africa, from West Africa to East Africa. We saw an attempt to continue neocolonialism mentality in Africa, whereby the West is trying to interfere in the internal affairs of the African countries. We saw what happened to Mali with the French trying to actually decide the leadership of Mali. So we had a coup that happened in Mali. And the interesting thing about the coup in Mali is that it is supported by the people. So it was an anti-West message that was being sent across. But of course, the highlight was in Ethiopia. What we saw in Ethiopia for the past 2 years, we have seen an attempt by rebel groups from Tigray, led by the TPLF, attempting to seize power from a legitimately elected government of the people, by the people. And basically, we saw an attempt also from the West, especially at the US Embassy in Ethiopia, trying to drive a narrative, and the media, the likes of CNN and BBC, trying to drive a narrative that Ethiopia was unsafe and unstable, and also basically creating an instability environment to act as a precursor for intervention in Ethiopia, as they have done in other countries. So basically what happened later after is we witnessed one of the most historical moments in our continent. Basically, it was some kind of an Adwa, the second battle of Adwa, because, you know, Adwa in itself is a witness of what happens when common people from Africa, Africans of all different backgrounds come together and fight for a common cause. So we saw this attempt being rebuffed by all Ethiopians all across the globe, from Africa to the cities of Germany, in Berlin, to Washington, to Finland. Everywhere there was a demonstration opposing any foreign intervention in Ethiopia. It was a real awakening moment. And when it was followed by basically the drive of the Normal movement, which basically advocated for African solutions to African problems, and that Africa has come of age to make its own decisions. So that was one of the biggest highlights of the moment. And also, basically, the people were galvanized by patriotism, by a sense of belonging, forgetting about their ethnicity, their tribe, or where they come from. The whole continent was in a frenzy. It was taken over because Ethiopia represents the ivory tower of African freedom, the only country to never be colonized by the European invading forces. And therefore, the need for Ethiopia to remain independent and to decide its own future was highlighted in that particular moment. And I think we need to take lessons from that the African continent is awake. And basically, we are telling the world that we are capable of solving our own problems by ourselves. And perhaps the recent and the most important, the latest aspect that has happened in the past 2 years, maybe, is the war in Ukraine, how they treat Africans. Ukraine were treated at the borders in Poland. We saw how they were being victimized because of the color of their skin, because of who they were, not because they were criminal or anything else. Also, we saw the response when it comes to refugees who are fleeing Ukraine. They were received with both hands in Poland and neighboring European states, while refugees who are fleeing war in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, they were being pushed back. In fact, Poland itself was building a border, was proposing a budget to build a border to stop refugees from entering Poland. But we saw a different stance, how they reacted to fellow Europeans who were fleeing a war zone. So we're basically seeing a double speaking. Africans have been exposed to the true essence of how we need to deal with the European nations when it comes to our own affairs, because basically we are like at the bottom of the pyramid. Our needs comes last. They have to take care of their own people. So we witnessed quite a great, I think this is a momentous period, because when you look at it, in a sense, it is, I would say it's a watershed moment for us in the people of Africa, and how we are responding to international and global affairs.
Thank you, Lavani. I appreciate it. I think one of the things I've noticed is that during the activities of the last 2 years is how coordinated or how motivated different parts, different Africans from different part of the world were coming together to make their voice heard. And one of the things I'm learning is that, there's a lot of education or understanding of other African countries of what's going on in other parts of Africa. So our information sharing is really working. And I want to thank you, because I've seen that you're one of the Africans who have been really supporting Ethiopia's sovereignty and dispelling the misinformation that has been out there about Ethiopia. So thank you for that. Why do you think the West is interfering the way they are interfering, but both in Ethiopia or other parts of the world? I mean, some of the statements that come out of officials from the U.S. is quite condescending and very bossy. It's quite a bit, disrespectful to the citizens of Ethiopia. The way they refer to an African country, it's almost like they're saying this is an order and you need to do this and you need to do that, and it's really for our generation, for the younger generation, is very hard to swallow this type of arrogance at this time, because we would be expecting global partnership and equality. So why do you think why do you think this interference is happening, not just in Ethiopia but all over? And what do you think will be some of the solutions?
Oh, thank you, Lades. I think we're experiencing quite an extraordinary moment. And as I have alluded earlier on, I've told you it's a watershed moment for Africa and the global South, because basically there is a world order that was established after the Second World War, which the Allied forces and people who won the World War II came together and decided how the world was going to be governed. So they met in San Francisco and basically set up what we currently call the United Nations. The United Nations was formed, an organ called the United Nations Security Council, which was basically an establishment of the Allied forces that had won the World War II, excluding all other countries from the decision-making organ of the United Nations. So the world order, the way it is currently, has placed Africa at the bottom of the pyramid, whereby the affairs of Africa are not really of interest to the global West. They are only interested in the opinion of Africa when it comes to when everybody else has spoken at the table. And basically, Africa cannot succeed with the current global order or the current establishment. So whatever we are seeing is a result of a concerted effort to always portray a Black man or a person from Africa and the global South and generally the people of color as a weaker race. It is instilled in institutions. Like, for example, how do you explain Africa not having a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council? We have almost 18% of the global population. And the question should be asked, if the United Nations decision-making organ is the United Nations Security Council, why are we not represented there? Maybe we should look at history in essence, because what is happening when you look at a president in the United States called Thomas Jefferson, basically famously who wrote the Constitution of the United States, stating that every human is created equal. And yet, at the same time, he owned slave farms in the South. So if you could look at this statement, if every human was created equal, to Thomas Jefferson and the likes of Thomas Jefferson in the US, Africans were not humans. That's the only way you could justify why he was still holding slaves in the South and claiming that every human is equal. We also have an example when it comes to the United Nations. The United Nations declares that every nation is equal, and there is the decision making, it is based on mutual agreement and partnership. Self-determination in international terms, the right to self-determination of every nation and sovereignty, territorial integrity and sovereignty of every nation must be respected. But then you look at this organ, which claims to say that we are equal partners in the global affairs. And at the same time, we have a few league of clubs, like basically the Western nations. which have abused the position of the United Nations Security Council to advance their own personal interest and not global interest. That's why we see what is happening in Africa is as a result of this global order. The order that exists currently puts the African continent at the bottom. We are not supposed to, our opinions do not matter to these people. What matters is our resources, what we can put, what we can sell to them. They only come to talk to us to negotiate about how much they can mine from our land, how much they can remove from us. Second-class citizens in the global affairs. We are treated like children of a lesser God. That's why we are seeing the uprise, because when also, I think also the history of colonialism, you have to look at it in that aspect. When you talk about colonialism happened in Africa in the late 19th century. Already slave trade was abolished. Almost every other part of the world was being freed from colonialism. But what was happening in Africa, in order to justify invasion in Africa, an African man was portrayed as an uncivilized person, a person with no heritage. The agenda was modernizing Africa. And you see that has played out for a very long time. The mentality of placing Africans and African countries affair last. We are second fiddle in everything that when it comes to global affairs. That's why what we see today is African people who are more educated. We have access to technologies like Google, Wikipedia. We can read history by ourselves. We can see who we are. We understand that we have a heritage. We as a people we have a history. Our history goes way back to. We find out that one of the oldest fossils in the world is found in Ethiopia. Not to be intimidated or not to play second fiddle in global affairs. That's the Africa that you need. An Africa that is awake, an Africa that is playing as a partner in the global stage, not just as a participant, but actually decision maker. That's why we support the cause for calling to reform the United Nations Security Council, so that when it comes to decision making, there we will start making decisions for Africans as Africans according to our interests, because nobody else is taking care of our interests except ourselves, and nobody's going to fight for us if we do not fight for ourselves. That's why we're seeing more and more people are waking and saying enough is enough. We need the right thing to happen, and the only right thing to happen right now is to treat Africa as equal in the global stage.
Thanks, Lavani. I want to go down to ethnic conflicts and how the West is using ethnic conflicts or instigating ethnic issues within different African countries and pinning one ethnic group against another. What is the motive behind that? You know, what is the tactic, the divide and rule, weakening African countries, for exploitation? What is it? What kind of tactic is that? And what can we do as Africans to educate our generation, the younger generation, about this, because it's certainly working in many places. So please touch upon why it's being done and then what we can do about it.
I think you're very right when you talk about divide and rule concept. We saw this play out even during colonization here in Kenya. Our history is very clear. When the invading colonizers who are coming to our countries, they armed one community against the other. Basically, they keep you busy fighting each other, so you forget who your real enemy is. So it's a kind of deception that we are told. We are told that a sister must rise against a sister and a brother must fight against a brother. But when you look at the whole context in it all, is that when it comes to our prosperity, we must look at things that unite us. And surely there's more that unites us than there is that divides us. If you look at our countries, every person, like for example in Ethiopia, a child born in Amhara or Gambela, or a child born in Oromo, or a child born in Diredawa, or a child born elsewhere in Ethiopia, I mean, the only thing they hope for is an opportunity to pursue their dreams and hopes in life. There is no hatred in these children's hearts. These children are not born hating each other. I'm not hating you because you're Tigrayan. I'm not hating you because you are Oromo, or I'm not hating you because you are Afar or Amhara. The idea of hatred is planted in us. It is instilled in us by a few people who want to exploit the resources that we have. Basically, by keeping us divided, they get the opportunity to loot what is within us without us taking note of. For example, the biggest example in Africa is the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is always alluded that the Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the richest, actually the richest country in the world in terms of world resources. When you look at the resources underneath the soil of Democratic Republic of Congo, they're humongous, they are huge. For example, coltan is used in making mobile phone and electronics. It is one of the biggest deposit, if not the largest deposit, is found in the DRC. But what is happening in the DRC is we see armed conflict, whereby they instill, or they are, because you see, when you talk about armed conflict, guns and RPGs and all these sort of machine guns, they're not made in Africa. This material emanates or originates from the Wild West. So you need to loot the resources at a cheaper price and keep the countries under and industrialized, because if DRC is industrialized and be able to process its own mineral, and be able to process its own resources, refine it before sending it to the and selling it to the global market. We are all united, that we all share the same ancestry. We all share the same ambition for our continent, not just as nations. I, myself, and for example, the interest of Kenya and the interest of Ethiopia are intertwined. There is no way you can separate these two. You must understand that it must be stated very clearly that nobody hates Tigrayans. Nobody wants to see a Tigrayan die. Nobody hates one another. This is something that has been instilled in you. They want you to think someone hates you so that you can take up arms. And basically, a brother rising against a brother. And just as it is for people in Afar and Amhara, there is no reason for us to fight. If we can solve our conflict by talking to each other, then let's talk to each other. Conflict is only going to aggravate the situation. And this country was given to us by blood and sweat that we enjoy today. And we have under responsibility that prospered us by hard work. It is important that it is passed to every person in Africa, every person in Ethiopia, that we are one people, we are brothers. We can solve our problems by talking to each other. Africa is big inside, and we can choose the leadership above the selfish interest of a few individuals. Because what we see is if there is even if there is no enemy within, there is no enemy at all. We should not mind what the enemy is planning about Africa. We should be more concerned about ourselves. The leaders that we elect, are they willing and are they telling us the truth? For example, the truth is always going to win. No matter how long it will take, the truth will always come out. It may not reach to him, or he may not listen to this. But the leader, Gabriel Michael, Gachureda, the Tigrayan people, Liberation Front, you're not fighting a war of liberation. You are fighting a war killing your own brothers and sisters. Nobody wants to kill Tigrayans. So basically what I'm saying, my plea to every Ethiopian of all backgrounds, that we all have the same dream and aspiration for a better and prosperous Ethiopia, for a better and prosperous Africa. There is enough room for all of us, and there is no need to fight each other. We need to review our relationship because we are a nation of diversity. Africa is blessed with rivers, is blessed with oceans, is blessed with dry land, is blessed with wetland, is blessed with lowlands and highland. When you look at everything we have, whether you are Amhara or you are Oromo or you are Afar, you need to remember one thing, that your ethnicity is not to be disregarded, but it is not the main agenda or the main thing that should define you. You should be defined by your content of your character and your belief in your nation. We're not just shouting nationalism, or we're not just shouting you to be patriotic. What you're enjoying today is a fruit of hard work, a fruit of pain paid by your forebearers who wanted to keep you free so you could pursue your dreams and hopes. So whoever interferes with your dreams and hopes, or with that opportunity you have been accorded to pursue your dreams and hopes, is interfering with our interest and your personal interest. So my plea is, forget, try and reach out to your brother and sister. We don't hate anybody. We don't have hatred. We don't have a heart to hate. We are built to love. We have love enough for everyone in Ethiopia, be it a Tigrayan or whoever it is. Don't let anyone lie to you that a particular ethnic group hates you because of your ethnicity. We may have our differences in the past, but we are more interested in the present and our future. And our future can only be greater if we come together, iron out our differences, and move together as one unit. And that's the only way we're going to succeed.
Thank you, Lavani. And we're running out of time, but for our last discussion point, I just want to ask you what your thoughts are about, the conflict that is currently raging, Ukraine and Russia. African Union is being asked by President Volodymyr Zelensky to address the African Union. What are your thoughts on that? Why do you think Africa is being somewhat important to this current conflict right now? We have a lot going on our own, as Africa is always busy with one thing or another. What are your thoughts, and what should be their, what are your thoughts on, how Africans in general are viewing this situation?
I think in a very clear way, we need to state that Africa should remain non-partisan in this conflict. Africa should not be aligned to any side of the war. Currently, as it stands, this war is not just it's a regional war. It's a challenge to the global and existing world order, because the war in Ukraine right now is not just a Ukrainian war, a Russia fighting Ukraine, but you're seeing military aid and fighters coming from all over the world, from especially NATO countries, trying to fight on the side of Ukrainian. And basically people have taken sides. So if President Zelensky of Ukraine has requested to address the African Union, we do not yet know the details of what he wants to talk about, or particularly what interest he wants to advance. But we can only engage. With Ukraine in a perspective whereby we are discussing how we can partner with that country, but not in the concept of the ongoing war. Because in the context of the ongoing war, taking sides will only put Africa in a conflict that is not its own conflict. This is not an African war. This is a European war. It's a conflict ongoing on in Europe, and we should leave it as it is. Let Europeans decide, or let them decide the war for themselves. Already Africa has enough on its table. We have conflict raging in Mozambique. We have hunger problem and climate extreme weather events happening in Madagascar. And in South Africa recently, in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, we have extreme weather event happening in our continent. We have clashes in the Sahel region, that is Mali, and basically the whole region, Burkina Faso, extending to Niger. We have a problem with COVID-19. It hasn't gone away. We still need to vaccinate our population. We have conflict in Ethiopia. We need to resolve these issues. Bringing on something else about the war in Ukraine and all these other issues will only drive our attention from the main agenda. Let's focus on the main agenda. If President Zelensky has requested to address the African Union, I think he should be given the opportunity to address it, but he should not ask Africa to align itself with Ukraine or to align itself with Russia. And Africa should not take that path or that route. That route will only lead to further conflict. Even so, if today President Vladimir Putin of Russia also requested to address the African Union, we should accord them the opportunity. We should not go by what the media is telling us or what the West is telling us. Let's do our own assessment and decide. We know, especially, as much as we don't wish war on anyone, the conflict in Ukraine is a global conflict. what you see in global global economy being affected. Because do you know there's also some kind of hypocrisy going on? Because if you are telling us not to associate with a particular country because it has invaded another country, but your country imports oil and relies on the oil from that country. So are we telling us that there are some things that are more important that we should engage in, and there are others that are less important that we shouldn't engage in? So there's a kind of hypocrisy, and the whole notion of sanctions in itself, like, for example, we have seen the bitterness of and the pain that sanctions can assert on citizens. And basically, sanctions are illegal because they have no legal basis at all. This is just one country making a political decision against another country. So we shouldn't get involved in the war game that is going on in Ukraine. Let Ukrainians and Russians solve their own crisis by themselves, because they are capable of doing that. Because we advocate for African solutions to African problems. And so let European solutions to European problems be given prevalence in this conflict. We shouldn't take sides. We should just accept. If we were to engage with any party to the conflict, let's engage with them in a sober way, without being influenced or poisoned by media from different global media, our perspective being thrown around the world. But it also should not be lost to us what happened to Africans who are fleeing conflict in Ukraine, and how he's going to address that particular issue. Because we need to know if truly there is a place of Africans in Europe, and how he's going to advance that agenda. We are not against anybody. We are not fighting, but we must also be told what actions or what steps are being taken to ensure that in case of any such conflict in particular countries in Europe, Africans will not be mistreated the way they've been mistreated by Ukraine and Poland, who are in this conflict.
Great. Thank you so much, Lavani. Please come and visit us again here at Prime Media. This is another home of yours where you can speak your mind and reach out to people. I'm really thankful for your time. I appreciate you taking this time and spending time with us. Hope to see you again, and keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Prime Media audiences, I will be back with another guest. Thank you.